Chapter 2, Motives and Means. The Value of Spices. By the mid 1400s, Europeans had several motives for exploration. For one thing, they wanted direct access to the spice growing areas of the world described by Marco Polo. Because of the monopoly held by Arab traders and Venetian merchants, spices were very valuable throughout Europe. In some places, spices were so valuable that peppercorns were used in place of coins. Payments were even counted out peppercorn by peppercorn. Spices by the pound were used to pay fees, tariffs, taxes, rents, and ransoms. This is a picture of someone paying their fees with spices. Europeans were so enthusiastic about spices because their food was not very tasty. At this time, Europeans did not yet have any of the fruits and vegetables native to North and South America. Potatoes, tomatoes, corn, bananas, chocolate, peanuts, strawberries, blueberries, and pineapples were all unheard of. Europeans did not have sugar until the late Middle Ages. They also had no coffee or tea. Europeans typically butchered livestock in the fall. They used salt to cure the meat for long-term storage. After a few months, much of this meat was not very appetizing. A pinch of pepper, cloves, or ginger can make the bad tasting or even spoiled meat much easier to eat. This is a picture of the Silk Road, which is an overland trade route between Europe and Asia. It's hardly surprising then that Europeans developed a taste for the intense flavors of spices that come from plants grown on tiny islands in faraway places. As you have discovered, getting those spices wasn't at all easy. Because of this, Arab traders and Venetian merchants charged very high prices. Then in the 15th century, the quest for spices became even more problematic. The Turks shut down the Silk Road, an important land route which had been previously used to transport spices from the east. The Europeans needed a sea route to Asia. Nobody was sure that such a route existed. Everybody hoped one would be discovered. The great kings of Europe began looking for brave explorers, shipbuilders, mapmakers, and others who could help them with this quest. The Crusades. Exploration was also fueled by another series of events in the Middle Ages. Generations of European knights and soldiers went on crusades to the Middle East to capture the Holy Land from Muslims. When Europeans reached the Middle East, they saw that Islamic civilization was much more advanced than they had been led to believe. Crusaders returned home and described the goods and cultures they had encountered. This added to European curiosity about the world outside their borders. New ships. Arab traders had been sailing across the Indian Ocean for centuries. Therefore, they had learned a great deal about navigation and shipbuilding. By comparison, Europeans generally made shorter voyages within European waters. European sailors navigated mostly by staying near the coastline and watching for known landmarks. Their navigational skills were not as advanced as their competitors. Their ships were not well suited to long voyages across uncharted waters. Generally, ships built in the Mediterranean shipyards of southern Europe had large triangular sails called lateen sails. These sails provided easy handling in the winds that blew along the Mediterranean coast. Northern ships had square sails, which were more effective on the open ocean. They also had hulls built with thick, overlapping planks. These hulls were built to withstand the rougher waters of the Baltic Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Both of these ship designs had advantages, but neither was ideal for long voyages on uncharted waters. Then in the 1400s, Portuguese shipbuilders combined features from these two different kinds of ships. By doing this, they created new, more seaworthy vessels called caravels. Caravels had the sturdiness of the northern ships and the easy handling of the southern ships. Their masts were rigged with lateen sails so the ships were easy to handle. But the caravels also had square sails to take advantage of strong winds that could send the ships across the open ocean. The ships had hulls sturdy enough to sail on rough seas. They were also large enough to carry men, supplies, and trade goods farther than ever before. Finding their way. Sailors needed ways to keep track of their location and direction when they were out of sight of land. To do this, they relied on the sky. During the day, sailors could plot their direction in relation to the sun's apparent movement across the sky from east to west. For example, the sun setting on the right side of the ship would mean that the ship was heading south. The sun setting on the left would mean the ship was heading north. Ship pilots also had a variety of navigational tools to help keep their ships on course. Pilots used instruments such as the astrolabe and later the sextant to determine the ship's latitude. By measuring the height and varying positions of the sun, moon, and stars in the sky with these instruments, pilots were able to obtain information about the time of day and the ship's location. As you might imagine, though, taking exact measurements on a bobbing ship was difficult. Speed was measured using a log attached to a rope. The rope had knots tied along it at regular spaces. A sailor counted the knots as they slipped through his hands. The number of knots let out during a certain amount of time was used to calculate the speed. Today, ship speed is still measured in knots. The magnetic compass, a Chinese invention, had been in use in other parts of the world for centuries. Europeans also relied on it to determine direction. However, many captains and navigators did not really understand how or why it worked. To measure the passage of time, sailors used a sand hourglass. The ship's cabin boy turned the glass every half hour. The time calculated was checked against sunrise and sunset just in case the sand ran too fast or too slowly. Navigators also made use of observations made by the crew. Information about the clouds, birds, waves, and anything floating in the water all helped to track a ship's position on the sea. Europeans were building new ships, learning more about navigation, and updating their maps. Soon they might really be able to sail to far-flung parts of the world.